Okay, so in the last part of the tutorial, we looked at styling our form element or our input element, and we successfully did that and allowed the LIs to look relatively nice. When we're going to be typing something, they're going to be pulling through. So now what we want to do is go ahead and create our JavaScript file to trigger something when we press a key down, or rather when a key comes up. That's the best way to do it. So let's go ahead and get rid of screen.css. We don't need that anymore. Let's go ahead and create a JavaScript file. Okay, so let's go ahead and just save that out. I'm going to save it inside a folder called JS, and I'm going to call it primary.js. Okay, so in here we want to write our code that's going to trigger something when we press a key down. So what we want to do is the first thing is document.ready. We want to check that the DOM is ready to be messed around with. And in here we want a key up event handler on our auto suggest field. So what I mean by that is we've got our class of auto suggest, so we can target this input field here, and when a key is up we perform a particular thing, and that's just going to be an anonymous function. So we're just going to wrap a load of code inside and it can do whatever it wants to do. So we need to first of all select the element we want this to apply to, which is auto suggest, and then we say dot key up, and then in here we say function. We're creating an anonymous function, and inside of here is what's going to happen when a key is up. So I'm going to type alert it works. So now when we return to our form, when we press a key, you can see that we get a alert dialog, it works. So we now know that when we press a key, I've just pressed backspace, whatever's inside here will trigger. And what we're going to trigger is the process of passing this the contents of the field to the PHP script, gathering the results from our table, and then displaying them out as LIs inside of that UL. So relatively straightforward. It really is quite simple if you can manage to get your head around this initial concept. So when a user presses a key, what do we first want to do? Well, we want to get the search term that they have, that they've typed. We want to get the value that they've typed. So I'm going to say var search underscore term equals, and I'm going to say this dot attribute value. So this is basically taking the value of whatever they've typed currently in the form. You can do val if you prefer, but I prefer to use the attribute like that. Okay, so now let's go ahead and just alert search term, and let's see what that does. Just do it stage by stage. So if I type in A, you can see I've got A, L, you see I've got L, E, and then X. So every time I type a key down, it stores whatever I've typed into that variable. So now what we want to do is we want to use jQuery post to perform the search, and we want to pass this search term that we've created through to the PHP script, and then using jQuery we want to retrieve the result from the PHP script and display it out in the results area. So we're going to be using post to do this. And then in here we want to specify first of all the file that we're sending this to. So it's going to be ajax/search.php. In the first part of the tutorial I did show that in the directory structure. We haven't created this file just yet, but we're going to be doing so in a moment. Inside of curly braces, after a comma, we're giving the second parameter, and that is the search term. So I'm going to pass a variable to PHP, a post variable to PHP called search term, and the value I'm going to give to this would normally be here, so val, but I'm just going to pass this variable through, so search term. Okay, now the last parameter is a callback function, and this takes it essentially allows us to read what has been passed back to us in this from this file. So I'm going to say function data and then a couple of curly brackets. So in here we now have this variable called data, and what we can do is we can place that into our results area. So whatever's passed back from this search.php is within this variable data. So I'm going to leave it at that for now. I'm going to go ahead and create this search.php file. So I'm going to create some PHP tags, and I'm going to save that out in a folder called Ajax, and that's called search.php. Okay, we obviously need to connect to our database at some point, so let's go ahead and create a new file, and let's save that inside a file called core, a folder called core, and let's call that connect.php. So we'll leave them as they are for just a moment, and let's carry on with discussing what we do here. So the first stage the first stage that we've already done is assign a key up handler to this auto suggest field. The second stage is to place the contents of that inside of this variable search term. The third is to perform a post Ajax request to search.php. So let's go ahead and start to connect to our database. Inside of here, I'm going to say MySQL connect, and I'm going to give this 3 parameters. The server that I'm connecting to, so the MySQL server that I'm connecting to, the username I'm using, and the password. I don't currently have a password. Now we're going to select the database that we want to use. Now if we go ahead and pull up phpMyAdmin, you can see that the database that we're using is called AutoSuggest. So AutoSuggest, and you know, I know that them credentials are right. I know that this database exists. If you're not too sure, you can use or die MySQL error, and that will just give you any errors that you get back. But I know that these work, so I can just close this off, and we can be done with it. Now, inside of search.php, the first thing we want to do is be able to access our database. So we need to go ahead and require, I'm going to require once, ..dash. Now what I've done is I'm traversing back a directory because we're currently in the Ajax folder. If you just look at the top of my text editor here, Ajax folder. So we need to go back, we need to go into core, and then we need to connect.php. Okay, so I mean this isn't entirely necessary, but it's more than likely that another part of your website will need to connect to your database or your MySQL server and select your database. So therefore, it makes sense to include this in a separate file. Okay, so in here, what are we doing? Well, let's pop back over to primary.js. We are sending a variable called search term. Okay, so in PHP, what we can actually do is pick this up using $_post search term. Okay, but the first thing we want to do is do the necessary checks to check if this has been set and that it's not empty. If it's empty, we don't need to do anything. There's no point doing anything with an empty variable. So we're going to create an if statement, and in here we're going to use isSet to check whether it's set. So if is set $_post search term. Now as long as that is equal to true and empty $_post search term is false, so as long as the variable is set and it's not empty, we do something in here. Now what do we want to do? We want to query our database, we want to do a search, and then we want to return these values as LIs. So we're just going to be looping through any data from our query and displaying it out as UIs. We're just echoing it out. Now what happens when we echo something out in here? So if I echo something, at the moment if I was to run this and I pressed a key down, data would be equal to something. Okay, so that just gives you an insight into how that works if you didn't catch it. So we need to escape any harmful data. So search _term is equal to $_post search term. So we're just placing it inside a variable called search term. And here we're going to use the MySQL real escape string function, and that's just going to escape any characters that may allow SQL injection to take place. So now what we want to do is we want to query our database. So I'm going to create a variable called query, and I'm going to use the MySQL query function. Now inside of here, this is where we do the clever part of searching our database. Now we want to select city from and our table name. Now if you didn't catch it earlier, let's go over to PHPMyAdmin, our database table is called cities. So we're selecting the city here, this text here, from cities where, now here's our condition. We need to say where city like, so we're comparing it to something, where it's like, and I'm using single quotation marks here as opposed to these sort of slanted ones. We want to type in search term. So this is our search term. We're selecting the city from the cities where the city is like this search term. Now what we can do is we can use wildcards around these. So we're saying anything that starts with this search term. Now at the moment it will match exactly the search term. So if we use a wildcard here, which is a percentage symbol, it will search anything. So say we typed in L, it will search anything that starts with L and ends with anything else. Okay, so that's how we do it. And that's our query done. Relatively straightforward. Now what we need to do is we need to loop through our data. So let's go ahead and say while, put that H back in. So while row is equal to MySQL fetch associative array. So if fetching an associative array of the data that's returned from our query, that just allows us to identify it by field. So if you're not too sure about this, you'll see it in a moment. Now while that doesn't equal false, we can loop through. So this is our loop here. Now let's say we have 10 records in our database and we type in L here. 3 of our records start with an L, and therefore this loop will loop 3 times. So what do we want to do? We want to echo li, and in here we want to go ahead and echo the row city. So I've gone ahead and typed that just quite quickly, but I'll go ahead and explain. We're echoing out li, so we're starting our li element, and remember data will echo or will equal whatever we sort of feedback from here. So we're echoing li, the city that's returned from this query. Remember the first result. The second time around this loop, it'll echo it again. So we're passing as many variables, as many lines back as we have results, and then we're ending the li element here. So how do we test this? Let's go ahead and inside of here, alert data. And let me just bring this up a bit. I did that for ease of viewing for anyone that's watching, but for now we can just pull it together, make it look a bit tidier. Pull these in as well, and pull that in as well, and pull that in as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and come in here, press enter. Let's go ahead and type L. Oh, nothing's been returned. Let's just check why that might be. Oh yeah, here we go. So while this here doesn't equal false, I had it equal to false, so that's why nothing was being returned. Let's press enter and let's type in L. There we go. So what we've got back here is we've got a list item with London in the middle, we've got a list item with Liverpool in the middle, and a list item with Los Angeles in the middle. Now this data element that we've had returned back, we can just pop back into the results, and then it will display how we want. Let's just test that it filters down. So LO, we've got London and Los Angeles, and let's type in LON, and we've just got London. Let's go ahead and type in LONP, and we've got nothing, so no results there. Okay, so now that we know it works, in this next part of the tutorial, we're going to actually get it to go ahead and display in this list.